Hi everyone. This is a review for Friday. A review for Friday, 9/2/16. Now what we have here, this is actually some work from Wednesday that we're going to use for a little review. We talk about the internet being the connection, the internetwork that allows us to connect different networks, whether you're from home, CLTEL in Clear Lake, whether you're at McDonald's, communicating to Facebook or communicating to Google or the other literally millions of locations that are connected into the internet, connecting to these. In a lot of cases, you're connecting to some website. For example, here's NIACC. NIACC has a couple connections into the internet, and then we work in that area called the IT area, in which you're on PCs in here, you connect into NIACCs, and then from NIACCs you go out to the internet. And then we'll talk more about all locations here at NIACC. Alright, so for this Friday we emphasize a couple things. We reviewed the password. When you're done in the lab, you sign off and you turn off the monitor. Sign off the computer. Don't shut down. Do not shut down. Alright. And then you can just click off the monitor. And that's every day when we finish up Intro to Computers. There's a section called Focus on Learning. We're going to talk about that next week. And it talks about change. That ability to be able to adjust. And we talked a little bit about being able to focus on the work we're doing in class. For example, on Friday I asked them to focus 20 minutes on what we were covering on the board. In the next unit, next week, not this week, we'll start talking about grit. Alright. We'll talk about computers in these four areas: hardware, the actual equipment; software, the programs that tell the hardware what to do; and people. Some people just use technology, some people are a little more experts in using computing devices. We use technology all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. Even like in your automobile, or programming your microwave to heat something up and so forth. We're using some form of technology, and what we want to do in this class is move you from just using something to being more of an expert. The other key area is how all this hooks together. And understanding that when you're on a device, and as soon as you communicate, let's say, through the internet, as I say, through the internet to some web server or some other location, that you understand how that communication works. Alright, so let's take a look at a comparison here of hardware, the actual equipment. And then we talk about software, tells the hardware what to do. And we're going to talk about layers of software there. And then we have out here the user who wants to communicate with the software. What we want to do is make you more of an expert, that you can move down and deal more with hardware. Let's just say add some memory rather than just being a user. We talked about binary numbers, bits, ones and zeros that represent something in the computer. Everything in the computer is represented by ones and zeros. If nothing else, before the course is over, you'll have an understanding of bits and how we measure things. 8 bits typically gives us a byte, or in this case, 1 character. These 8 bits represent the number 65, which represents a capital A, in ASCII code in the computer. More on that later. So now we have a little more of a diagram here. Here's where we're talking about the bits and bytes. Again, now we're talking about the internet. NIACC has 2 connections to an internet service provider, which is the Iowa Communications Network. One thing we emphasize in class, students had a little time thinking about, it doesn't make a difference how or what device you use when you connect into the internet. You have to go through some form of internet service provider. You have to get in somehow. So let's just look at some examples here. If we have somebody in the labs on the PCs, they go through our equipment here, through this router, and out the internet. Now, if they're in the room and they have their laptop, okay, let's say they have their laptop here, and they're connected to the wireless, well, the wireless goes into the campus network, and it too actually goes out a different path out to the internet. Okay? Somehow or another, that everything here has to go out there. Now, somebody might be on their smartphone. They say, I'm not connected there. Well, if they're on their smartphone and they're connected to a, let's say, US Cellular, Sprint, somebody, they're going through their equipment eventually in and out of the internet. There's no way around it. No way around it. Now, let's look down here. The data we're talking about up here, let's take a look at it up here. So we store bits, ones and zeros, that represent characters, or in a lot of cases it might represent a number. That's supposed to be a U, a number, and so forth. So we have data. Data we think of as raw facts. We typically store the data. We use software to process the data into information. For example, we might store a piece of data that would be your birth date, and we can process your birth date and figure out your age. So we could go from your birth date to your age. You'll hear me reference this a lot, okay? A lot as we move along. One last slide. Let's look at the big picture, okay? For example, over here, I was talking about how Facebook, they have services. They're their own ISP, by the way, but they're connected to the internet. So when you're in here and you go to Facebook, you literally have to go through, communicate through us to Facebook, and then they send the information back, let's say, to your PC. Now, if you're on your phone, let's use green for your phone, and you go to your provider goes into the internet, goes to Facebook, comes back from your provider, goes through their equipment, and back to your phone. If you're on the college, not much different. You connect to an access point here at the college, that's the wireless part, then it goes through the college's equipment, goes out to the internet, you go to Facebook, come back. That's how it works. And what you're doing is you type in some URL or some piece of data it goes to and gets processed, and you get some information back based on what you gave. Input, process, output. IPO. Alright. So, remember, bits always what's getting processed. So this is our start. And that's it for the first week.